Ooh,
Margaret, you got the little box this time. Oh, with three of us, our faces are all skinny.
Oh.
That's interesting.
It is. Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, let me there. That's better. How'd you do
Oh,
that?
wow.
I'm not doing that.
I'm not
I
doing
think
that.
it's Chrissy.
It's Chrissy behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. Okay.
I have the square now.
You're the square.
I'm the square. This is very true. I am a square.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to Compassionate Connections. We're excited to be here, and this is always a important and a topic we can talk about with no judgment. There's no silly questions. There's no stupid questions. There's just you guys, if you want to ask something, because we're going to have a great discussion. We are going to talk about navigating OCD and addiction with family members, which can be a hard topic. And we'll do introductions. I'm Margaret Sisson, Executive Director of Riley's Wish, and our focus is OCD and substance use. And how that affects the family, and we offer resources and educate and raise awareness. And I'm thrilled to be here with my two friends, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So we'll start. Neil, your top left, you start.
Neil Hemmer here. I am a sufferer of OCD and had a substance use disorder. I think I still probably technically do, but I'm almost 3 years sober. So that's neat. Yeah, I'm a trauma therapist in the Chicagoland region. So I do these sorts of mental health thingies professionally. And this topic is one that's very near and dear to my heart. And hopefully Margaret and I won't cry too much while we talk about it. Yeah, this is really important to me. And I try to attend every single one of these, or as many of these as I can, because this OCD and my substance use disorder will never go away. So part of this is part of my own recovery, right? Is speaking so openly about it and trying to educate others. And another thing is, I know there's probably some really upset, really hurt person still trying to drink and drug their stuff away. And I want you to know that there's hope. You can be clean shaven and look like Mr. Clean, like me, after you get sober. So, there's hope. There's hope, and I want to shout that from the mountaintops as often as I can. So
good. Yes, thank you, Neil.
Yeah,
Lori.
So I am Lori Johnson. I am also a clinician in the mental health field. A person who has had a whole family of origin issues with substance use and alcohol. And I've more recently been saying subclinical OCD, but that's not to be offensive to anyone else, but just kind of my own journey and process of figuring out what OCDs look like over a lifespan. I'm really happy to be here too. I have met all of you wonderful people over the years, and there's a few in the chat I see, Michael and Lauren too. Of just being able to come together and have some real conversations about advocacy, and also the co-occurring component of substance use and alcohol use disorders along with OCD. Like, both of those suffer in isolation, and some suffer right out in the wide open. And all of us being friends and colleagues and our professional and personal circles crossing so much, it's really cool to get together and have these conversations, and to let other people see that too, because it's so stigmatized. And as all of you know listening, OCD is also completely misunderstood by most. Anyway, now I'm just rambling, but I'm happy to be here.
Rambling is good.
Yeah.
Well, and we're going to have an open discussion. Please, the important part to this is that we have the audience ask questions. That helps us. We have a few questions, but we'd love to hear from you all, so we know, what do you want to hear? What do you want to talk about? What's the struggle? We all individually, I have, as a mother, has struggled, and most people know Riley was my son, and I lost him to an accidental overdose. Coming on 8 years, and it was very lonely then. We didn't have anything like this. There wasn't a support. Really not till we went to the conference did I realize that there were other people and there were parents that dealing with the same thing as I did. And although when we got to the conference, it was strictly, it was about OCD. Nobody talked about substance use. And I thought if I could get Riley to this conference and his OCD could get better, then the substance would go away. As we all know, that's not true. And so it's a vicious cycle, and Neil can speak more on that. But I lived it as a parent, and it is a vicious cycle. From residential places to therapist, no one wanted to treat both. Let's hope I hope we get questions, and I have been helping actually, or talking to a family that is in kind of a crisis, and asked me some questions today that I thought I'd love to hear what you all talk about.
Oh,
Sure.
Yeah. So, and I always need to, for Chrissy's sake, we always need to say, please tune in to these webinars with YouTube, on YouTube or Facebook, or the wonderful OCD Gamechangers website. And we'll all post this to our websites or to our social media. So yeah, let's begin. If anybody has any questions, and let's see, I guess I need to go on the.
We can see your comments, but we can't reply. I don't know how that went away, but we can see them along the way. So if you have questions, please.
Yeah. So if anybody, this is something I kind of lived through, and not always sure how to give the best advice. So I'm going to throw this out. When there is someone that is struggling with OCD, and maybe also substance, not necessarily, but certainly OCD, and are not an adult yet, so under 18, but now do not want to take medication, they don't want to engage in any of their therapy anymore, but they struggle with suicidal thoughts. And for me, as a parent, gosh, that's so difficult. That's so difficult, because you want to help somebody, you want to help your child. Nothing's worse than when your child is suffering, but you can't make them. And that's the hard part. And I mean, that's what I am thinking, but let me get some feedback from you guys too.
Yeah. So being able to deal with someone in your family who doesn't want to get treatment, they don't want help, they don't want meds, and they're just deteriorating kind of in front of your eyes. Yeah. Or also maybe struggling with suicide. I think I just have to my heart goes out to those families for sure, because it can be really confusing. You're not a clinician, right? And there is a national suicide hotline that anyone can dial. Is 24 hours a day, National Crisis Hotline 988, for anyone who is struggling to reach out for help. Um, it's hard to know what to do, right? I'm a trained clinician. Neil's a trained clinician. Margaret, you know a lot just like we do, but you're like, I'm not a clinician. You're always the one to say that. I'm not a clinician. When everyone and I've seen you on the phone supporting people and families and like showing up for other people.
She might as well be.
I know, right? I think it's hard. I guess
and maybe we talk about, because we can't make somebody, but how can, from my case or any of you, how can we support that family? What can they do? What can we do for them?
Yeah.
I just say, well, there's,
nothing we can do. It's too
nothing you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what people do a lot to families. Is like, oh, we don't know what to say. We don't know how to check in with you. We don't have the answers. Nobody has the answers.
Right. Right.
So I think like being able to provide support, like knowing the crisis line is there, knowing that even from afar, from out of state, like we get this question all the time, like, what do we do if we don't think our person is safe? Or, how do we recommend treatment to them when we know they really don't want to hear about it? And I'd say, like, we're talking about mental health together and collectively, like, how does that person want you to show up for them, right? Like, if your family member's struggling, like, what do? We want you to do this, but how do we support you when you're struggling?
Yeah, I think that's a great to have that conversation, validate. I hear you. I remember with Riley, he just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it anymore. And I would say, then I'll help you minute by minute. We'll just do it minute by minute.
Little by little. Yeah.
And that's all I could. So, and that was always, people make fun of me running the stadium stairs. So many times I would be there and he'd call me and I'd see that. And he'd say, I just can't do this anymore. I can't get out of bed. And I'd say, well, you know what? We're going to do it minute by minute. And you get your feet on the ground and get out of bed and get out of the shower. I'm going to run this stupid stadium 15 times. And then we're going to check back in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all we're going to do. And we did that a lot. And that kind of helped him taking it in little pieces. And maybe that's like with somebody who doesn't want to validate them. I know you're tired and I know this is hard. And how can we support you?
Because sometimes it might be, hey, just call me after you're done with your stadium run. Mm-hmm. Come sit with me. I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go to treatment. I need to go to the hospital.
Right.
And this is where that fine line, and Neil, I'll pass this over to you, is like, that fine line between I'm helping and I'm a support person and I'm enabling and I'm participating in your behavior. I think that is the most confusing part. And being through this myself as a family member, I'm like, where's the line of enabling?
Right. And when does it become unhealthy for the parent in that situation?
Yeah, or the sibling or the uncle or the grandma, like anybody, all of your family members. Yeah.
So I guess I have a couple things to say to this person who is struggling. And also I just want to touch on suicidal ideations. Everyone is so afraid of them, which is understandable.
Yeah.
There's a little tiny gnat. It's so understandable. And I think for me, it was also the most harmful thing. Like, I think people being so afraid of my suicidal thoughts when they were all totally passive, right? People would shut down the conversation immediately, or they would immediately call the suicide hotline, or they would immediately say, right, oh, well, you need crisis help, right? Well, no, I don't. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling, right?
Yeah.
And they're big, scary feelings for sure, right? I mean, I can't validate those parents enough. I'm not a parent myself, and I can't imagine. And just the thought of hearing my child say that to me shakes me to my bones. But I think when I think about it as a clinician, and I think about it as a survivor of suicidal ideations, I think about it that being able to talk about it and being able to totally destigmatize it and just be like, yeah, people feel like that sometimes, for sure, right? And that's really hard, but like, what are our next steps, right? Are you safe? Do you have a plan, right? I mean, kind of doing that really light lethality assessment, right? And just saying, right, do you have a plan? Have you thought about carrying this out, right? Do you have access to the thing that you want to carry out? All those kind of things, I think is important. And then if people are just like, no, I don't want to go through with it, right? I'm just feeling this way. Listen, I mean, just sitting and listening and validating how big and scary, because most people I have talked to who are having suicidal ideations don't want to go through with it, right? They're having those thoughts, and they're also really scared of those thoughts because they're like, wow, this really is the end, right? There is no way out. This is a dark tunnel. I can't see the end of it. So this has got to be the end of my life. It doesn't have to be the end of your life, right? It doesn't. And I think that just being able to air it out and talk to people about how hard those thoughts are is so important. And I think on the second point of not wanting to get treatment, yes, self-determination is just the worst. It is the best thing ever. And yet everyone needs self-determination and mastery over their life choices and things. But that is, I mean, that's really the crux of this whole thing. And it was the crux for Margaret when she was supporting me through my addiction. It was the crux for Lori when she was trying to support me through my addiction, constantly checking in on me. And I just didn't want to go. And there's nothing they could do. They couldn't drag me away to rehab. All they could do is just continue to listen and continue to love in the best way they knew how. And I think what helped me when I was going through the stages of like kind of pre-contemplation and kind of like, nah, I don't know if I want to get better. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Was people giving me options, right? It wasn't just I had to go to rehab. It was, let's find a place that works for you. If IOP is what you think you need, that's fine. Let's try that out first. And if you need a higher level of stuff, then we can check that out, right? Another thing that I do with myself all the time, I don't know if this will help anyone or not, but I ask myself all the time if things are helpful or unhelpful, right? So when I'm thinking about my own treatment and I'm thinking about, am I going to give into this compulsion, right? Or am I going to give into this urge to drink or drug, or right? Is that helpful or unhelpful, right? Is that what's going to get me to where I need to be, right? Where do I want to be? If someone is having suicidal thoughts or refuses to take medication, it's classic Socratic questioning, right? Is that helpful? Is that unhelpful, right? What's the purpose of you not taking medication, right? Because if they're not taking medication for fear of side effects, or they're afraid that, maybe the government's putting drones in your blood. I don't know, right? There's tons of wacky conspiracy theories about medication these days. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, sometimes people think it's going to change who they are at their core. I know it's opposite.
Yeah.
It's going to change who I am. I don't want it to change who I am.
Right. Yeah, and I think what I've learned is that you're going to change a million times into a million different people over your life. I thought my identity was solidified at 16. I was wrong. But yeah, I mean, I thought, but I think those non-invasive questions, just like, hey, right, like, is that helpful for you? And if it is, right, because some people will be like, yes, it is helpful for me, right? And I'll be like, like I am drinking this entire bottle of whiskey. It is helpful for me. Really? Why is that helpful for you, Neil? Right? And now that I think about it these days, it wasn't helpful for me. I thought it was at the time, but I wouldn't have been able to give you an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's the only coping tool that feels like it works.
Right. And learning those new tools is so important. Oh, and Felice said, oh yeah, and they might be afraid it might make them want to harm themselves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that is what I have learned so much with being around you guys and talking and Chrissy and Um, I feared that if I asked those questions or I talked about it more, would Riley want to, take his life? Because there were some dark, dark times that it was scary. And so I didn't know, gosh, if I talk about it, would he? And now I've learned the more and say, this is what you're feeling, talk to me about it. Do you feel like we need to, call, get help? Or do you need to talk? I'm right here to support you.
That's
And
that's a great point.
Yeah.
yeah, and now I've learned, but that used to really scare me. That's scary as a parent when you hear your child say something like that. And so a lot of parents, myself included, then you avoid that. You avoid even talking about it. And I've learned that's not the right thing. So,
I don't know if I wouldn't say it's not the right thing, but I would say maybe it isn't helpful, right? Or maybe at some points it's unhelpful, and maybe at other points avoiding it was the helpful thing to do.
Exactly. I think that's what Tony just commented. It was a tool in the toolkit, and you never throw a tool out when trying to fix a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know anyone who would just throw their tools away. They'd have to be pretty rusted out and unusable. This is a great point.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
I think a thing that I hear from families a lot, and something that I've experienced myself in my personal life with my sibling, is like when you don't hear back from people, right? When they're struggling, they're struggling, they're drinking, they're drugging, they're struggling with OCD, whatever the case might be, and you don't hear. You text, you call, crickets. And depending on the level of severity for that person struggling with addiction or OCD, you get really worried. Silence is like, whew, something must be really going on.
Oh, I lived it. And it was, and the fear was true.
Yeah,
And,
like they're drinking themselves to death.
Yeah.
They passed out or overdosed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of that attachment we can tend to feel in having constant communication with a family member who's struggling or friend.
And I'll be real honest and vulnerable here that I struggled with my daughter with that. I thought if I could control, I controlled out of fear, and because I knew what could happen, so I tried to control. And she, being brighter than me, said, "I get that, Mom, and you're controlling out of fear, and I understand that, but that's not going to work." And I had to listen, and I had to say, I'm going to try hard, and we'll communicate, and that's me, because of fear.
Mm.
And that fear was real to me, and I've had to, for myself, learn to deal with that fear as a parent.
Well, and I think that I don't know if I'm going to cry tonight. Pretty sure I will at some point, but I don't know if I will. But I've put my parents have, tried to call me, and just had to sit up and wait until the next morning. The one time what I'll say is this, at least from my perspective, is the act of letting go is the only act of self-preservation at that point. Right. And Margaret, it's a learning process, right? That I really can't control this, right? Even though it feels as if I can, this person is my child. right? I've raised them. I've been with them their whole lives. I can control this. That old silly cliche, let go, let God, right? And I hate cliches, but they're good because they are so true, right? That like there's nothing you can do in those moments except for taking care of yourself, right? Except for preserving your own sanity and letting go, right? And I think instead of that feeling helpless, Margaret, you turned it around to, okay, well then, yeah, how can I work on myself in this, right? This fear is coming from me. It's not coming from the other person. We don't have to be in constant communication. Okay, let's plan accordingly, but let's go on with our evening. Or let's go on with our
Yeah.
day.
And we had, I mean, setting boundaries and knowing, you know, if I text you or you're going out of town and I don't ever hear from you and I've texted you, I don't expect you to call and give me your whole, just say things are good or I'm okay. Because, and then I'll leave it at that. And boundaries, and I talked, if parents are listening, it's so important to set up those respectful boundaries in both ways.
Yep.
Because that's important. And maybe if it's a teenager, you know, they have to have some boundaries, not as much as like an adult, but they need to have some boundaries. But you all have to have a mutual respect where, and parents need to have those boundaries, but parents need to take care of themselves too. I'll tell you what, when a parent tries to do everything, it becomes enabling and it becomes, you know, unhealthy. And it becomes unhealthy for that parent for their life too. And I say that, and I think I was very fortunate. You know, I had a job, I ride horses, and I had things that were really important to me there. And I beg every parent to have something that's important to you, because taking care of a child or young adult that is sick is hard and taxing, and you need to take care of yourself too.
Yeah. And that decision, I think, Margaret, for you was probably pretty hard and self-reflective. Like, what do I do? What can I give? And how can I turn that back? Because I think a lot of times families can tend to focus on that one person, the one with the problem, and they just become the problem for everything.
Right.
You wouldn't be suffering if you weren't doing this. And that's that codependency component of like, we kind of need you to suffer so that we have something to do, which is awful. I know parents won't wake up and hope that happens, but it becomes part of a dynamic.
Yeah. And that, I mean, I even say that just with parents, like their children to go off to college, and moms are like just devastated. What are they going to do? And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at it. Your child's just stepping into another neat part of their life, and they're setting their wings off and going, and that should be such a cool thing. And I get, especially if you've kind of done everything for your child. But so important for that child, because when that child gets off and thinks that their mom is so miserable and unhappy and has nothing, that's not healthy for the child either. So,
so that's what I was just going to say about this whole thing, is that watching, I think, my parents die very slowly while I was killing myself, made me want to kill myself faster, made me want to drink more, right? Because even though I seem numb to the world, it was really difficult for me to watch my parents shrink their lives to, we got to call Neil every day. Right. I mean, this constantly has to be on our mind. We have to be constantly worried about him. that is probably a shame that I will never get over. I'll try to get over it eventually, but watching all of my loved ones have to remove themselves from my lives, understandably, right? And my parents being some of the only people left standing, along with you two and Chrissy. That was incredibly difficult, even though my parents were just doing what was best, right? They were trying to save me no matter what happened to them, right? There's that old like we have to do our best, right? Like we can't stop until we're totally depleted. That's not healthy. And it's not it's not healthy for you guys. It's not healthy for the person suffering.
Right.
It's just not. We need to all live our lives to the best of our abilities at all times. But a lot of times that means resting. And that means removing yourself from the situation.
Right.
Or turning your phone off. Right.
And that's the communication part of it that a parent needs to say, love you with all my heart, but I need to step away a little bit. And that's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
But and Neil, your parents have been there 100%, and I get it. Love you dearly, but the pain of what they watched and what they lived with. But I know they do it all again, and so, and if parents are listening, I mean, as a parent, we get it, but also try to take care of yourself, because it can take a toll on you.
Yeah. And I think the thing that we don't plan for as families, and I can speak this as a professional who works in addiction and having multiple family members in addiction, is that relapse could happen. And I think wishingly, we hope that it'll never happen, right? We hope that it won't happen again and that we finally got through the clear. And I think that is a disheartening reality. And, there's some mixtures around that. I think as a professional, there's the medical model, right? The alcoholism and substance use disorder is a disease. And some people need to be medicated for that, or constantly seek treatment and kind of keep their recovery journey in process. Others believe it's a moral thing and you should just stop, right? Well, all of us here really understand the words "just stop" in the human language do not apply to these disorders.
No.
Or the religiosity component, right? Like you can be healed by God, and you can go to, a church event and other things, and it'll be fine. This is telling you a lot about where I grew up in the South and kind of evangelical Christianity. There is a place for that, and I'm not knocking that, but that only one thing, one stent of treatment, one medication, one whatever is going to fix it all. That's the idea behind it, regardless of what you've come across in your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lauren said the Bob Newhart School of Therapy. Just stop it. Not all that effective.
Yeah, Lauren.
Well, but I think like psychoeducation in these matters are also important, and it's another reason why we do this, right? Is to have that psychoeducation. That just sucks. It seems so weird pointing over here for you, Lori, but that's what I mean. When I got home, that was a big conversation. So obviously, I don't know if any of you have ever tuned into one of these or know me in real life, but I went to rehab, right, to take care of my OCD and my substance use disorder concurrently at one of the only specialized OCD substance use programs in the country, which just randomly happened to be right next to my house, the Foglia Family Residential Treatment Center. But when I got home, we had like a 3-hour conversation about like, I am going to relapse at some point. Might not be today. Might not be for 5 years. Might not be while you guys are still alive. I don't know. My parents are getting up there in age, right? But it's going to happen. Like that is just as my OCD does that, right? Sometimes I have horrible episodes for years at a time. And other times I still have intrusive thoughts, but I haven't been like clinical diagnosed OCD for like 3 years, for as long as I've been sober. And that's just how it works, right? My OCD is going to come back and my substance use is going to come back in one form or another. Constant recovery is a thing that's always on my mind. But yeah, I mean, having that talk with your child, right? Celebrate that they've got clean, right? And also keep a good head on your shoulders that, yeah, what are some relapse prevention strategies, right? How are we going to handle that as a family system when it does happen, right? You won't actually know, but having a plan, right? Because that's going to be a crisis situation. But when it does happen, what are the things you guys already have in place? I have a whole list of questions written out for my parents because I'm super stubborn and mean when I'm suffering. So I wrote out a list of questions.
We all?
We are all. Yes, we are all really mean when we're suffering. But I wrote out a list of questions for my parents that are like, hey, here's some non-invasive questions that are in my language. You can read back to me if I start using again so that we can get through this together again, right? But yeah, having those plans in place, I think, are just like super vital. The place that I went to, at least the rehabilitation center that I attended, spent a whole week on that. I was there for 4 weeks, and a whole week on that was like relapse prevention. What are you going to do when it happens? Because it's going to happen. And I think it may or it may not happen, right? Which is true. But they treated it as this is for sure going to happen. How are you going to handle it?
Well, and to have a plan, I think that's an excellent idea for a family, because when you came out, everybody, oh, he's well, haha. And
God, right? Yeah, like, oh, we're out of the woods.
Exactly. Everything's great now. And what a great conversation to have, that this is an everyday thing. And there's always the chance that you can, if I told you how many times Riley relapsed, whew, and then we'd kind of start all over. But we really never talked about just what you said, Neil, to have a plan. What do we do? It just always became a huge crisis moment.
Yeah.
And but I think that's great advice for families.
And partners, right? We're talking also like, our family systems are not only our biological family, but the people that we choose to be near us and close to us. Mm-hmm. Partners and spouses and in-laws, and I mean, families,
right?
However we define it.
And even best friends. My best friend Mary knows exactly what to do if I relapse. Mm-hmm. We have I set up a bunch of nuclear footballs all around my circle because I know what's going to happen. So I just called all of my most trusted people and was like, here's the plan.
Yeah.
I don't know when this is going to happen, but the storm is coming and you better be ready.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point, is being willing to, Margaret, I know that a ton of families come to you and people come to you for support and call through Riley's Wish and make donations and try to support your mission. Mm-hmm. And also the shame that comes with admitting that our family is struggling or that our partner is struggling. And Neil, you put out those like nuclear footballs because you want people to know. You're like, oh, I know better than my struggling self to put a relapse prevention plan in here and plan A and B and C and D. And I did everything I could. But there's so much shame about talking about the struggle you suffer. Like if people go to their church, they're like, oh, I'm going to talk around the issue to get some information, but not really let them know how bad it is.
Right. There's so much shame to that relapse. There's so much shame to substance use. And then there's so much shame. Yeah, don't you, he wasn't drinking, but now, and then it's that rather than saying he's relapsed, more than anything, we need to surround them and help the parents and help the siblings. And that's when you need to step up.
Yeah.
Tony said shame is poison in recovery, and he is dang right.
Shame is poison, period.
Mm-hmm.
It is, but
It
we
is.
throw it around there.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that, I don't know, I get upset about this all the time, but if people would stop being so hoity-toity as if they have it all together, I just feel like shame wouldn't be a thing, right? Because I don't know. For me, it's like, who cares if your family is suffering? Every family suffers, right? And okay, so now what can we do, right? Not who cares in the terms like that doesn't matter, but who cares as in that should be accepted, right, as a normal human eventuality, and we should surround that family with care and support, not like, how did this happen to your perfect family?
Right.
No family's perfect. No family's perfect. We all got stuff.
Yeah. Everybody has shit.
Yeah. Or people are like, that person? Really? I never would have thought they would do that. That's like a shame statement. Like, I never thought you would struggle. What the hell's that?
Yeah. I thought your job was, God, he did well in school. God, what happened? What did you do?
Right?
A lot of shame on a parent too, when something happens with their child. And I lived that embarrassment, even in front of some of my family. I didn't want to talk about that or, say that.
You don't have to raise your hand.
Yeah, you don't have to raise your hand.
I have a question. Mom, just for everyone watching and all the other parents, can you maybe walk us through a little bit of like, how did you conquer that shame? That shame must have been so palpable, especially, no shame dog, but the region of the world that you come from. That shame must have been palpable. So how did you combat that?
You know what, Neil? I think I'm still working on that. I personally know I did everything I could have done, and I couldn't have lived with Riley 24/7. I couldn't have set control thing, and I knew, But you always go, what if, but I try not to go there. But there's still the shame. Did I do something? What did I do? Why? And I try to talk about that with friends. I've got a dear friend that I talk about that, saying, did I do something? Could I have done something different? But that doesn't matter now. And I tell, I tell parents all the time, talk to me. Well, I could have done this. I could, hell, we could have done a lot of stuff, and we could have done a lot of stuff that was really bad that would have made things even worse. So you know what? But that shame, and I think that's just a human, and especially of neither of you are parents, but when you're a parent, there's this deep love for your child that you'll do anything in the world for. And see, I'm going to cry. But when you lose them, there's nothing worse. and you have to, I think that morning I decided, was I going to just stay in bed, or was I going to get up and keep moving forward? And I made that choice. And I every day make that choice. And that gets easier, and that gets where I have more joyful times. And we I just went through, Riley's birthday. He would have been 33, and those anniversaries are just hard because it's what would he be doing, you know? And his friends are getting married, and they're having children and all that. That's just hard. And but you make a choice, and you surround yourself with um, people that understand that and love you and support you. And so that shame starts to go away, and not be that it was heavy. It was heavy at first, and it was hard. Um, but I feel like I'm working through that. I'm working through that. So, um, and in my case, I lost Riley. Um, but I did everything I could do.
Yeah.
So I think that's any parent. You just do the best you can, um, and now, like we started with this conversation, if there's somebody who doesn't want to get treatment and doesn't want to, no one gives you a book on how to do this. And so I see, surround yourself with people that understand, surround yourself with support, people that love you and are not judgmental and have empathy, even if they don't really understand OCD or addiction, but that they have empathy for you and what you're going through. And life is hard, and I think we all know, and we've all gone through things that are really, really tough. But you got, Neil, I think of your parents who, love you dearly. And, we just talked the other day, and you go, oh, I'm still living at home. You don't feel shame at all for that. You're going to look back and see, I can say, cause I'm old now, but you're going to look back at that and go, God, I'm so glad that happened, you know? So
Yeah. Lori, do you have anything to say about kind of the societal shame around family addiction?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm from the South, so we hit all that.
That's why I said you're from.
I'm originally from Oklahoma, so don't. I'm a Midwesterner.
Those things exist outside of that as well, but it's kind of like the don't ask, don't tell. You don't talk about things that go on inside your home.
Mm-hmm.
You make things look the same, right? And you try to keep the face and keep the structure and the facade of what's going while denying everything that's happening. And that is shameful, right? Inherently, like, don't talk about what's happening to you or to someone else. Why'd you tell that person that?
Mm-hmm.
You told them too much. And I think, like alcoholism and drug use within families, there's a lot of secrets, a lot of secret keeping.
Right.
So hold it all in, which inherently gives the message like, hold your shit together.
Mm-hmm.
And to counteract what Margaret said, everybody has shit. The motto was, we don't have shit.
We don't have any shit.
No shit. We don't have any shit.
I can't believe I'm the one who hasn't sworn this episode. That's crazy. I'm the only
Margaret
one who hasn't cussed.
Margaret's normally like, don't say that in front of me.
Yeah.
But it's true.
You know what? We're real here because everybody has shit.
That should be the OCD Gamechangers motto. Everybody
Exactly.
But I think like keeping it in secret and acting like nothing's going on. At my own point, and for multiple different parts of my life and multiple different family members, like I can't ignore that you have stuff going on. And if you don't want me to be a part of that, fine. But then I might not be a part of what you have going on altogether.
Mhm.
And that's a huge ambiguous loss. And that's a type of grief that where you haven't really lost anything, but you have lost more than what's visible or tangible. And that was huge. Like I remember at the time my sister was going through her recovery journey, my dad had also just died, who was like our, that was my primary attachment person. And I would just be like in awe, like, what am I supposed to do? And like what kept coming to me is like, let go. Like you're gonna fall apart if you keep holding on to this and keep waiting for the phone calls and keep blowing up her phone and keep kind of checking in with other people and trying to figure out how she's doing without really knowing and just letting go. And that was really hard because it meant that she might die.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to make peace with. Right. And Margaret, you've been through that. And you don't make peace with that.
No.
You don't make peace with that.
You don't.
No, you don't. You're right. I mean, that's it. It's what you do. I always hear that when bad things happen, they're going to happen, but it's what you do with that.
Yeah.
How do you go forward? And
My clapping seemed wildly inappropriate. I'm just now realizing. But I thought you were going to stop on, you got to make peace with that somehow. And I was like, we don't make peace with none of that. I was like, and you said the thing, and I was like, yeah, you said the thing that I was thinking.
It's a facade. Yeah, the peace too.
No,
like,
but it's true that like, and I tell my clients this all the time who come to me with these horrific traumatic life experiences, and they go, right, like, oh, well, so after this, like, I'll be better, right? You will have an improved quality of life for sure, right? And your symptomology will be near non-existent, but you will always have this with you, right? Like, this is not something that you just, you go to treatment for a little bit and then it's just done, right? Like, I will always have my substance use disorder with me. I will always have my trauma with me. There are some things you just can't make peace with. Death, there are some deaths you just can't make peace with. There are some things in life that just happen that you might take to your grave and you'll never have peace about. It's just true. And like you said, Margaret, right? It's not the actual thing that happened. It's what happens afterward that matters the most.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And honestly, like Riley's wish is why we're all here today.
True.
Yeah. I mean, how I feel incredibly fortunate. I started Riley's Wish. My family was so dear and said, what do you want to do? Because my family's kind of doers and I'm a doer. And I said, I think I need to do something that helps. So quickly this happened. And then I went, whoa, now what do I do? It had this foundation and it has evolved. It's evolved because of you guys and all the people that are on, we do this with Sean and Patrick and Chrissy, of course. And I've had more of a direction of what's my purpose, what's Riley's Wish purpose. And that's helped me decide what do I need to do with this. And, I'm not sure I would have known a lot of people if I didn't have Riley's Wish. So what a fortunate thing for me.
Yeah. I'm curious if anyone watching has any wrap-up questions for us. This has been a really great.
I think we need a part 2. This
What's
seems
that?
I think we need a part 2. This is one of these that I feel like needs a part 2.
A part
Yeah,
two.
there's so much that goes into this. Like we barely scratch the surface of all of the experience,
Mhm.
and just have a few tips for people, but it goes so deep, right? That's why sometimes we have like transgenerational trees of substance use and alcohol use, and I mean OCD is genetic, and so are the other things to some extent, predispositioned, let's say. Um, but like so much that goes into that, and the way that we modify around that, or have resilience, or cope with codependency, or cope with other tools in the toolbox, like Tony said.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, and I know we've got about time to wrap up. I want to thank everybody that with
Yeah.
comments and um, good good stuff, and that helps us. And Neil and Lori, thank you guys. And I'll say I didn't really want to. Neil's like, "No, you got to lead this." I was like, "Oh, I don't think I can. I don't think I can do that." I love to get on here and listen, and um,
We made you lead today. You did good.
You did it. You did phenomenally.
well, I
Lord,
think this topic is so it's I think it's so important, and I mean there's like we didn't even touch on there's the trauma of um, with family from the shame. I mean there is a lot. There's a lot. So yeah, we could easily do a part 2. Um,
totally.
and we'll get Chrissy on here too.
I have two questions. One is inspired by Lauren, so we're all going to answer that. And the other is just a resource to give for people who have family members who are struggling, or maybe struggling themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, first question is, what resource would you give? Book, podcast, author, anything that was helpful for you? And then, what one word of hope would you give to those struggling, that are navigating life with a loved one who has OCD and or addiction?
Can I answer this first before Margaret gives a much better answer? I want to go. I want to go first, so mine doesn't pale in comparison.
Okay.
Neil, you go.
Sweet. My one resource that totally helped save my life and got me at least prepped for the talk that Margaret, this opposite stuff is going to drive me nuts. What prepped me for when Margaret had the talk with me about going to rehab, and same with Chrissy. Chrissy and Margaret are really, Chrissy, Margaret, and Lori actually are the main 3 people who that weekend led me to get treatment. But what prepped me for it was a month beforehand, every single night I went to a SMART recovery meeting. SMART recovery stands for self-management and recovery training. It ain't got nothing to do with God. It ain't got nothing to do with no steps. It is all just tools, evidence-based tools that can help you with any addictive behavior. So I champion SMART recovery every chance I get. I still go to meetings. I love those people. They're just my friends now. They're super cool, and it's a very non-judgmental space. If you are even thinking about getting better, SMART recovery is the way to go. Just dip your toes in. That's all you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And a word of hope. Oh God, I thought I had one, and then it just escaped out of my ear. A word of hope. I would say that things do get better, and no matter what the outcome is, life has a way of taking everything full circle.
Mm-hmm.
And the pain and the hurt that you are feeling right now will not necessarily be forever. Keep moving forward.
Thank you. All right, Margaret, one resource.
Oh goodness. I was listening. I'm so intent listening to Neil that
I know I'm like enamored. He's like he's like the Tony Robbins of
yeah.
our group.
You know, I read a book called Resilience right after I lost Riley, and it was really impactful. For me. It I wanted to have that, and that I didn't think I could ever be. I didn't think I could ever be. To be honest, I think back that was so when I read that book, it really, and I wish I could, if I could type it in, or I don't know how can we do, but
I think we can leave comments.
That book was really important to me. And always a word of hope. And just like Neil said, I think it will get better. Will it go away? No, just like Neil said, he'll always deal with that. I'll always deal with the loss of Riley and that grief that doesn't go away, but it's better. And I have a lot to be thankful for, and I have a lot of joy in my life. And so it will get better.
Awesome. My recovery source is, I'm not going to steal from you, Neil, but I'm going to add to it because Tony asked what was effective about smart recovery meetings.
Oh.
You can answer that part, but smart recovery is like my go-to. It's amazing. There's just a lot of, I don't know. I think sometimes you have to cut through the crap because people have sometimes been damaged through morality of things or through religiosity, that this is just like, nope, this is like the self-measured approach to figuring out what's going on for you. Maybe you have other dynamics from your own experience that you can comment on, Neil. But my other resource would be the Russell Brand book, Recovery, Freedom from Our Addictions. It's freaking hilarious. And I love him from Forgiving Sarah Marshall. It's totally inappropriate, but like that's kind of who he is at the core. So this is like a no nonsense, lots of cursing in there, of course, and just a different way to view recovery in 12 steps. My message of hope would be you have other options. No matter what you're going through, and just reiterating everything else that everybody said, like it's nothing in our lives is permanent, right? And I'm sorry, I just said a trigger warning for everyone with OCD, but we don't really have any. If you're not an ERP, that'll be really triggering. If you are, you're like, yeah, I hear you. We don't have control, and nothing is permanent. And that's sad and beautiful at the same time. So, maybe you want to say more about smart recovery.
Yeah, just last thought, Tony, Lori, you said all the right things, though. I mean, for me, like, this is crazy because I'm like a very spiritual, very God-centered, like I got a Bible study, I go to church every week, like the whole kit and caboodle. Like, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I cannot stand AA. I just was not for me. And everyone told me like that was Tony, what really opened my eyes was there are other options. Lori said it perfectly that like there are a million other recovery programs besides AA. For me, whenever someone shoves me into a corner and says this is the only thing that you can do, I buck. Nope, that's not true. I refuse. I outright refuse to do the thing that you told me to do just because you told me to do it. So everyone told me to go to AA. Now it's like turned out for it forever. I was like, nope, that's not what I'm going to do. No. So, but
nobody backs baby in a corner.
Nobody backs baby in a corner. But also the other part for me was that, yeah, I am a trained clinician and I'm a big believer in evidence-based treatment. And that's all Smart Recovery is. It's literally just all science. And it's a lot of self-guided things. You can join the community if you want. There is a community aspect, but it's all just tips, tricks, and tools for you to use that I still use today. Like that, there are just a lot of really great tools that helped me gain a different perspective on my using. And then when the time came and I still wasn't done using, and Margaret and Lori and Chrissy all had to have really tough discussions with me, it was so much easier to take that. It was so much easier to take those discussions because I had prepped myself for them and I was already working these tools that were helping me change my perspective on why I was using. So yeah, I love Smart Recovery. It's good.
They have a lot of free and family resources on their website as well. Not that AA doesn't, but there's a ton of stuff out there. We could cover this in a whole nother podcast.
There needs to be a part 2. Last thing I will say was this was the one that I got the most comments on my Facebook. And if any of you parents who commented are watching, please feel free to reach out to me after this and ask for questions. A lot of you live right around me. Please, if you need resources or an ear to talk to, don't stay quiet. I mean, if that could really be my biggest thing, Tony is right. Everyone is right. Stigma is a murderer. I mean, stigma and staying silent, it's just unacceptable. You just can't do it. This needs to be, it's addiction and OCD are both family diseases, and they need to be dealt with a community.
Maybe we need this as a t-shirt. Shame is poison in recovery.
Yeah. Definitely be a t-shirt.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. You all are awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yes.
You did amazing.
Thank you guys. It was wonderful. And we'll stay tuned for part 2.
Stay tuned for part 2. We'll see you guys next month.
Yep.
All right. Love you guys.
Bye, everyone.
See ya. Bye.